Welcome back to East Asia International Management, week one. I'm just going to go through this really quickly as soon as looks like Thomas is stuck in the waiting room, not able to join. Anyway, other people can talk to him about this. The week 1 and 2, we talked about how there was many management theories. How should you manage? And we identified that these theories, although they're good and famous around the world, they need to change depending on who you're trying to manage and where you're trying to manage. And so we identified what is parochial. Parochial is you're just born and you only know there's one way of doing things. You have no respect for any other way. You think anybody that's doing things differently is bad. And if you get more education and you learn more about culture, you learn more about the SRC, self-reference criterion or self-reliance criterion, and ethnocentrism, you will become aware of other cultures, but you still don't really understand them if you just learn about the titles. And so we showed many different examples that are identifying differences in cultures. They're not good, they're not bad, they're just shockingly different. People do things differently. And then we started talking about how can you identify culture. We talked about Hofstede, and there's several dimensions of culture he's identified, like the power distance, individualism, collectivism, masculinity, femininity, and uncertainty avoidance are the big ones. Then we went through papers that he developed, and we showed identification of different countries are different just looking at those features. Then I started talking a little bit about Hall, Edward Hall. I take it most of you can't see these details clearly, right? Is it better if I zoom in a little bit? This is just all review. So we identify this. If you have questions, let me know. Be aware of Hofstede and Hall, Cluckhorn, Strodbeck, Trompenaar, Schwartz, Globe. I didn't talk too much about these other people, but they are good. They're very valuable. They're good for you to know. Hofstede is just super, super famous, and Hall is very important in Korea because so many Korean people use the high context communication, which means very few words. And in my class and internationally, you have to learn to use many words, to be very precise about what you're saying verbally, so other people around the world understand you. And that is the low context culture identified by Hall. Then here's the great paper. It's about 6 to 8 pages. And basically he identified 4 different countries, and he surveyed people from each country, about 5 people each. He had a class of 25 people. He surveyed them, and he referenced 2 books. He ended up coming up with a great article, and the fact that he referenced himself 10 times in this story made him extra famous. Here's more details about Cluckhorn, Strodbeck, Trompenaar, Schwartz, the Globe project. And then I just started to talk a little bit about cultural mistakes. One cultural mistake is in Korea, you're very obedient and you're very respectful. And so if your superior or your boss or your professor, if you think they're on a different level, you allow them to keep talking all the time without shutting up, even though you were supposed to be presenting and getting 15 marks for yourself. Hint, 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 hint. So avoid some of these cultural mistakes. Tell your professor some ideas if you have them. Identify there are different ways to work with many different cultures. Identify the differences. We also talked about how Max Weber and Karl Marx, super, super famous in business. Almost everybody that's serious about studying business, international business, they know Max Weber and Karl Marx. However, I think that you should be telling this guy, the world, that now he's out of date. His theory about how China and India are not growing because of their culture and their differences doesn't work now because they're growing much faster than the Western countries. So he's out of date. And the other thing that he identified is people usually have Protestant ethic, which means you work for yourself, one person before God. So you do anything you think is reasonable because nobody's ahead of you except God. If the boss says something and you disagree, Western people can go around them because they basically only need to follow God. However, Confucian ethic shows you're all supposed to work in a group. And then we showed many different examples. Could I get somebody to talk to me about which one of these colorful slides they thought was most interesting or most important? Talk to me. Were you able to see these slides? Can you identify what I'm talking about?
Yes, for me, for example, the contact slide was quite surprising that
Contact. Okay, this
yeah,
one?
that Asians or Asian countries have a lot of contacts basically with everybody, and the Westerners only have a few. And I wasn't aware that it's like this.
Okay, well, don't understand. The most successful people in the world, even Westerners, they must have many, many contacts. However, what we see in North America and in the Western world is usually people work in small groups. Like there might be like what they call a clique. There's one group that's really good at marketing, one group that might be good at cold calling, one group that might be good at research, one group that might be good at writing, one group that might be good at public relations. And they usually only talk to each other. And they're all different groups versus in Asia, even if you have different interests, you're still connected to everybody in the school and everybody in the company, things like that. So yes, that's very, very important. Again, please be clear. You must have as many contacts in the world as possible. The more contacts you have, the more successful you can become, especially if those contacts are good. Like close friends will help you get jobs. Close friends will help you develop your jobs. Strangers will not. Very good point. Anybody else?
The boss thing.
The boss. Where's the boss?
Yeah.
Boss.
The next to the right up to the connection. Yeah.
Okay, same slide. Okay. What did you like about this?
In the Asian part, in the red part, the boss is huge, represents as huge man, but in the blue part, the boss is just has something like a little much power than the other employees. So that seems to be surprising for me.
Right. And so how does that relate to our class? International management. What usually happens in Korea, in almost any company, including a school?
The superior is always assertive or have much more power than the other people, other followers.
So since I am a teacher in Korea or in Asia, generally the other people, the other workers, the other staff, the other students think of me as a god. I'm huge. But you don't talk. You wait for me to say everything or say anything. Actually, in the 1980s, this was so big that airline pilots, they knew that there is one senior pilot and everybody had to listen to that one boss. You're not allowed to ask questions. If you're a good worker, you do everything they say until they give you a promotion. And so what happened when you're in a plane and the pilot fell asleep and the plane was coming down towards mountains and buildings? It happened many times in Korea, where the junior pilots, like the co-pilots, they were just, oh, what do we do? Should we wake up the pilot? Should we wake up the boss? Yes, no, you would do it. No, not afraid. You do it. They didn't do anything and they died. The plane crashed into the mountain or crashed in the buildings. Not once, more than once. So I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying be aware that usually you're supposed to respect the hierarchy in Asia. And we are in Asia. But what's happening with our group? What's happening with our class? Who is the boss, or as Mr. Yu said, the superior? Am I a superior? I think there's no superior in this class since you guys are paying the bills? What's happening here? Nobody talks. Exactly. Nobody talks. You're following the Asian style. But our class is following what? Thomas, go
The
ahead.
blue
Sorry.
thing?
Yeah, the blue thing here is a representation of our class. Although we are in Asia, we have a Western boss, or as you said, superior, but even those words are not correct. I am just the professor, you guys pay me, so in my mind, we're all equal. Or you guys are the boss of me. I work for you. So you guys should be talking more, saying whatever you want, influencing class any way you want. Easily, you should be debating with me, and I encourage you to debate with me, or even tell me to be quiet, old man, I talk too much. The opposite of the Asian style. So practice with me, because if you go work for GM or Google or a Western company, and you do that quiet thing and just wait for the boss to say something, you will not do well in a Western environment. You need to promote yourself, talk more. If there's an assignment or a project that gives 15 marks, start talking about it rather than waiting for some king to give you permission.
Can we start now?
Yes, absolutely. Why do you ask? Why don't you just tell me, hey, old man, be quiet. We need to present. Perfect. So who would like to present? I will give you screen sharing capability. Anybody want to share their screen? Nobody wants to share their screen. Nobody wants to present.
I just checked the email, so I saw that group 2, right? Juno and Pia. So group is gonna present today, right?
Yeah, and Thomas as well. Maybe some of you can share your screen, because early in class my Wi-Fi stopped working, so the presentation went off. So just to be safe. Otherwise, I can try to share it as well. No problem.
Or I can keep talking. You guys are not learning what I'm saying. If you don't be proactive, you will miss your opportunity to get marks. With me, if you do something, you get marks. If you stay quiet, you don't get marks. It's that easy. Okay, so I'm going to continue to go back and teach.
Okay, then I'll share my screen and hope the internet works.
Every other person in class, shame on you for not being proactive and taking advantage of the opportunity. Go ahead, Pia. You have the ability to share screens, even though Pia was pretty clear. She said her internet's not working well and she hopes her teammates help.
That's fine. We'll make it work. Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yes, and I'm trying to learn German.
Yeah, right. Everything is in German. Okay, so our topic is how can employers and HR managers manage cultural differences in an international company? Here's our agenda. We're going to start with the topic introduction, as well as the importance of managing cultural diversity. And then we'll also talk about some international companies that are already focusing on cultural diversity. And we also have an outlook. Okay, so what are the main questions that we plan to focus on? First of all, we want to know what are the most frequently occurring differences that can affect a company, which theoretical models can be used to manage diversity, so what is already in use, and maybe is there even some new way to do things, and also how can international companies profit from cultural diversity. To do so, we are planning to do a literature review in scientific databases like Google Scholar, Scopus, or Word of Science, I think it's called. And we will search for scientific research papers, case studies, and yeah, basically theoretical models for managing cultural diversity. We will also plan to do a survey to talk or find out more about experience of cultural diversities, maybe from people who are working in cultural different group mates can't be present to talk about the importance of the topic. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
you're cutting out a little bit, but now I
Ah.
can hear you again. Thank you.
Okay, I'm trying my best. Okay, so the importance of the topic, because of the globalization and also the pandemic, home office and virtual teams are getting more and more important, which means that thousands of companies are operating on an international market and are also working with many people from all over the world, which basically results in people from very different cultures with very different values working together. And this is why we think it's very important to focus on this topic to see what can be
Professor,
to
may
avoid
I
problems.
share the
And
screen? Because I think she's cutting out so much.
Pia
Okay.
was very clear saying that her internet's not going well. If she has a teammate that can help, it would help.
Okay, so I can share the screen.
you hear what I said about the importance of the topic?
We started to hear part of it, but some of your
Okay.
sentences were cut off.
I'm sorry.
No, great try. Thank you for being so proactive.
Okay, I can try again. So I'm just going to start again. So basically,
Just a second. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, you're doing very well for international management. Everybody else in her team, you're not doing very well. You need to be more proactive. You need
maybe
to
somebody
step
else just
up.
read the slides.
Okay, importance of the topic. Ongoing globalization, home office and virtual teams.
Can I move on?
Mr. Yu, are you part of Pia's team?
Yeah, I'm.
Then talk.
So I'm going to next. I'm going to talk about some cases where international big companies try their best to manage the cultural differences and multiculturalism. So, for example, one of the examples is Google. Google has over 35,000 employees who worked in employees research group in 52 countries. And also Google has cultural and training that are conducted to foster embracement of even more diverse cultures among the multicultural Google employees. And the next case of the case is Amazon. The Amazon conducts the conversation on race and ethnicity, which is kind of a seminar. It discusses the influence that ethical diversity and multiculturalism that has on the working environment, and renowned scholars, activists, and writers, which are so famous all around the country, teach all around the world, teach different topics regarding multiculturalism and other diversity-related topics to multicultural Amazon employees to foster the multicultural environment and get many diverse people to get along. The last example is Sony, and Sony has the diversity week, which is designed to create the company values through multicultural diversity by holding many seminars to the employees. Diversity Week is the week of the month that conducts some kind of seminars and meetings to give awareness on the diversity in the business and emphasizes the benefits of the multicultural working environment so that Sony could have more multicultural environment and have multicultural respectful values. So these are the three examples of the international companies that respect multiculturalism and tries to manage multiculturalism in the different ways.
Yeah, and now we have Outlook. So we will use different theoretical models on how to manage cultural differences in companies that we will find in the literature. And one of them will be, for example, Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory. which is a framework that is used to understand the differences in cultures across countries and to discern the ways that business is done across different cultures. And it was, or it is since 1980. And it has these like 6 different points, which we already kind of talked about, which is power distance, collectivism versus individualism, uncertainty avoidance index, femininity versus masculinity, short-term versus long-term orientation, and restraint versus indulgence. And then on the next slide, there is just the literature that we used.
Great. Jung Moon, how would you like to be the professor and give an evaluation or comments about that team?
Well, first of all, for the marks, I want to be a good professor. I will give them points. For the topic, I believe that for the companies which planning to become an international company or already international company will be very find it very helpful for their topic, from their topic. But for the theory part, as we learn in the class, the theory can be applied differently depending on countries. So maybe they might have to be very precise about telling their theories on certain countries.
Yes, absolutely, for sure.
That's my comment.
That we are probably going to see what we will find, which case studies we'll find, and if it's which perspective we have to take from that point.
Okay. I heard you talk about giving them some points. What does some mean? In my mind, some means what, 3? Are you going to give them 3 points out of 15?
No, I said because I want to be a good professor, I will give them full points.
Full points. So 15 out of 15.
Yeah.
Very good. Very kind. Especially since you know that they will probably be evaluating you soon. So good. Thank you. Anybody else? Who else is in and what about, is Han Kyumi, I think not in the class today, right? What about Abdullav Jakovir? Are you in class today? No. Ulukbek, can I get some comments from you?
It was a very interesting presentation for me. They present out of several different cases, and I think in the end we will see the perfect presentation.
In the end, you mean your presentation is going to be more perfect? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe.
Okay.
Can I have?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I also like this topic very much.
The plan for now was several companies, but if we find a good case study, maybe it would be better to focus on one company. I agree with that.
And
Maybe it will be kind of difficult to have a case study of several companies because we don't have much context to these companies.
Right now, I understood that you have started to study Google, which is obviously around the world, and they should have a very good international management program. They should. We don't know if they do yet. Same thing with Amazon. It's almost everywhere around the world. They also should have a perfect international management program, but we don't know if they do. For example, Samsung is also pretty much around the world, and they should have a good international management program. But if you walk into Samsung offices here in Korea, 99% of everybody you're going to be seeing is Korean, with Korean thinking and Korean style. Samsung, for example, has an international diversity office in North America. I think it's in New York, and they have a diversity officer, but that officer is in a New York area where maybe they care more about diversity in those laws than in Korea. So those diversity issues, there's a question, does Samsung practice the best possible international management when they're working in Vietnam or working in Uzbekistan or Germany or in other areas that don't have a diversity officer, for example? So you have some of these things, you have some cases started, great. It would be ideal if you guys understand which type of company you would like to work with in the future, and maybe give some suggestions or analysis of that also. If team member number 1 wants to work for company number 1, you could evaluate that. If team member number 2 wants to work for company 2, that could be a second type of example. That might be something that might help your future going forward. But I think what you're talking about is great. You do have some things promoted. I agree with the 15 out of 15 for you guys. Again, now, I didn't hear you giving any sources. When you presented, I think I just heard you saying you think it's important and you think Google's good and Amazon's good. I didn't hear too much about you got your information from somebody good and reliable and respectable. I did notice that you can see in one of these cameras that you are referencing the book, which is famous about managing in different countries. There's a lot of good details there. Our book, the regular class book, also has great examples of how to work in Korea, in China, and Japan, but it is getting a little bit old. And there's another book that's talking about cultural differences around the world. And there's some great examples that we use in class. But as we identified, there's over 200 different countries, and Google is almost working in all of them. Do you really want to try to identify how to work in each of 200 different countries, knowing that India alone, one country out of 200 or more, that one country, India, has thousands of cultures inside it? Or do you want to pick more of a best case scenario for big companies like Hyundai or Samsung? What should they be thinking of when they start to go global quickly? Maybe they can learn from. So have you started to think about those things, guys?
We have been focusing more on the big picture, but those are definitely things that we are going to consider for the literature review.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you very much, folks.
Thank you.
Your project is good. I'd like to remind you that the teaching team is also doing quite a bit of research, and there are several projects and files that we already have and we're developing. So if you want to talk to them, even outside of class, they may be able to help quite a bit. Mr. Moon, Jung-Ho Moon, you have your hand up. Thank you for using the technology and putting your hand up. How can I help you?
I just wanted to say one more things about their topic. It just came up in my mind. As we know, coronavirus changed a lot for the working environment, and also I believe that there are a lot of changes for the international companies. So just my idea, but if if the topic can be how to manage the cultural diversity of the international companies in the post-corona area, can be also one of the good topic, I believe.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Maybe I'm just a troublemaker student, but Are you trying to be very caring? Some people say we should love trees. Trees have feelings, manage for them to. Are you saying coronavirus has feelings, and we need to be respectful of the feelings of viruses around the world? Can you be a little bit more specific? How should the research paper focus related to coronavirus that you're talking about?
Like because workers can work in in anywhere, so companies might use a lot of internet. They will educate workers through the internet. So I believe that managing diversity might need a lot of technology. I think there
So in the past, companies moved into other countries, like Samsung went into China, and then they went into Japan, then they went into Vietnam. They went into countries slowly and gradually, and they would send 10 people or 20 people, 50 people into one country at a time. But you're saying now with coronavirus, companies are starting to work online, and instantly they're working with 100 possible countries and staff and customers from each of them. Okay, that's a good point. How any company, even a small company, needs to understand how not to be like Trump, for example. Okay, it's a good possible focus. And yeah, it might make you super famous and super rich right now because everybody should be learning about that. Thank you. That's a good suggestion. Any other comments? I guess it's time for either the next team to start talking or I get to start talking again. Pick me, pick me, pick me. Nobody's talking, so I'm going to start talking.
Our group will present next time.
Next time. Okay. In addition to encouraging you guys to learn about, let me go back, my turn to present. Again, your presentation was good. I already have the access to these details. Where is it here? So what you can see my screen now, right? Yes. So we were talking about this idea of the boss in the top middle here in Asia. I don't know if you guys are aware, but in our class, we are in Korea. So if it was a regular Korean company, Korean organization with a Korean boss, you should be quiet. You should be loyal and obedient, and you should basically just shut up until your boss tells you something to do. That is usually very respectful and normal. You might be able to guess what your boss is doing and try to provide files to help him do his job, but be careful. If you do too much, more than he's looking, he could get angry. If you try to go around your boss, many bosses in the Asian culture might get very angry, you might get fired. But we are not in that situation. I am not a typical Asian boss. I am an international type of boss with a Canadian start, and I'm trying to get closer to the equality of Scandinavia, where people are all equal. So if you're staying quiet when you have an international boss, please be aware. Ulukbek, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
What if you join an organization and you have a Scandinavian boss or North American boss and you stay quiet in the company? What will that boss think of you?
Maybe he or she may think that I have a problem with him or her.
That's good. That's one thing. Any other suggestions? What about
Maybe
Go
he
ahead.
might think that the employee is unproductive and not so much contributing to the company.
You're okay, possibly. If you're not talking, then he may think you're not valuable, you're not producing anything for the company, you're not productive, right? So exactly, Mr. Yu, what do you have to do because some people don't like to talk. Some people are very shy. Some people are introverts, and their social style is not to talk and interact very much when there's a lot of people around. So if you are one of these, let's say this first, am I allowed to say black person with the boss being a white person? That sounds terrible to say. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you are that first black, oh man, I can't even say that. If you're employee number one and you're quiet and the boss just sees you're quiet, what could you do, or what should you do, or what are some things you could do to do well in the company, even if you don't like to talk? Thomas, what about you? What would you say?
Well, I think that I would maybe send an email, or I would try to talk to him about like, I guess that it depends like how close and open I would be able to be to him, because like I'm introverted, right? However, I think that I would just try to talk to him somehow and tell him that I'm more of an introvert person, so I'm listening what he's saying, and I might just talk to him when he will be alone, if he has the time, or send him an email, or just somehow try to get him to have a private conversation with me, or also try to kind of change my style and be more open about stuff.
Good. You know of MBTI, humanmetrics.com, and the 16personalities.com. There are different websites that identify people, their personalities, their characteristics. It also identifies how you communicate, how other people communicate, how you learn, and how other people may learn differently, all of those different things. What if my personality style, or if the boss's personality style is not focused on chit chat, not focused on talking, not appreciative of just chit chat, and they only like results? Many company employers, their bosses, only record the results. You have to have a good relationship with your boss. Undoubtedly, you have to do something so your boss likes you. Otherwise, your life could be hell. But the alternative is, if you produce well, if you show many results well, that can change. So how could you do that?
I think it's important to not be invisible and to share everything that you achieve with your boss. So like Thomas said, maybe with emails, but also, even though if he doesn't like chit-chatting, maybe just let him in on the things you found, and updating him with everything so that he knows that you're trying.
Right. Maybe at the beginning, if you can get some sort of results from that first day, give him a report or a link to your report, and don't just give a strange report where he has to guess what the link is and guess what's in the report. Make a file name so that your boss knows what is valuable, what is in there, how it's valuable. Like title your link to him so that he sees, I got these results today if you're interested. And at the end of each week, do the same thing. Identify, here are the things that I think could help you doing this project. You don't need to chit chat, just send him results, send him these reports, send him these files that help him do his job or help the company do that job. That is the way that you can work in any country if you're not able or interested in talking a lot. However, people that are amazing, like an Einstein person that doesn't have good connections or friends with teachers or friends with bosses and friends with other people, they usually crash and burn and don't meet success. Many people have proven that the relationships are more important than the results you create. You want an example? Donald Trump. Just because he was able to get relationships with many, many, many people, who knows what he's actually changed in the world. So keep that in mind. Next, I should be quiet. The next team should be telling me to be quiet and presenting your details. If not, I'm going to keep talking. Going once. Next team, you guys said you were just going to present on Friday, that's right? Okay, I'll take that as okay. So we've identified there's many different ways culture is different. We've also identified how TV is impacting culture over the ages. There's a bunch of just funny examples about cultures changing. I wanted to also talk to you about student culture and how you should stop focusing on just being a student until you graduate, and then after you graduate, think about a job. That is, in my opinion, poor management for international management.
Professor?
Yes.
What is how China sees the world slide?
I didn't understand your question. How is Chinese?
Slide number 73, I think, the picture.
Oh, okay. Well, that's talking about Asian people with dark skin.
No.
Well, I'm not allowed to talk about the
76,
bikini.
I think.
Okay, this was a cool slide. So 76. This one?
Yeah, the bottom picture.
It's just a joke talking about how in one country, usually you don't know the reality of what's happening in a different country, except for the crazy stereotypes. So if we zoom in on this, so what it's saying here is that in China, people will see that United States is cracking, it's dividing. One party versus a different party. There's rich people over here, poor people over here. Nobody has medical care. Wall Street is dividing the country, and they're saying, silly things just based off of stereotypes. And even in China, the stereotypes is that everything's controlled by the imperial palace and things like that. So what we're seeing is that what you see depends on where you are. Wherever you are in the world, you are going to see things differently. If you're in North America, you think North America. If you are North America, you probably think North America is the best. If you are American, many Americans think they are the best. If you are Chinese and in China, you think you are the best. If you're in Korea, you probably think Korea is the best. If you're in Vietnam, you may think some parts of your country are the best. So it depends on where you are. And these are just jokes that we're talking about. Does that help understand what we're talking about there?
Yes.
And like they're saying, right in the middle is a small little island of Taiwan. And because you're basically in China looking at United States, you may notice that Taiwan is an island there, but it's small and it doesn't really have anything except your Chinese flag. So you may not notice that, or even Japan, you may not notice that as important at all. You may think China is number one, that's the biggest, that's the center of everything. The only other thing that's important to see is United States, and you see many problems. Other countries, like Europe, you may notice the Prada and fancy details, but you don't really notice details of Taiwan or Japan or these other countries because they might not be important to you. It depends where you are. This other example that we're talking about, when it shows culture is influenced by TV, you have Western TV, like the TV show Friends or Sex and the City. These TV shows are getting known around the world. You can see these with Netflix in almost any country in the world. And so as people start seeing these, they start knowing more about them. They start being able to communicate more in this way. They start thinking this is normal. So these TV shows influence culture. So it's not just the American way. It's not just the Chinese way, not just the Indian way, and not just the Korean way. There's many things that impact culture. I hope that helps clear up some of these details. Other things that I was going to talk about, I talked about Max Weber, how he promotes mostly the idea of the Protestant work ethic. What does that mean? He says some people are Protestant versus some people are Confucian. And that's what controls development. If you're Confucian, you stay in a group and you just do whatever your boss says. And so things generally go slow. And Max Weber and Karl Marx say this does not develop very fast. Versus if you're North American, he says most of your work ethic is based off of being Protestant, which means you work only before God. You are one before God. So you do anything that you think is right and reasonable, regardless of what your company says or your boss says. You do anything you see as just. But he was saying that Protestants usually go slowly and they don't develop as fast because of that. Confucian, however, today in 2021, China is much bigger. India is much bigger. They're growing much faster. And now that they're growing with 1 billion people, is there any way to slow them down? Something to think about. We've talked about these interesting comics and characters. The student culture, the idea of you should be looking internationally. Not only can you learn from online and online MOOCs and YouTube classes, you should be focused on your employment, your future, your success, develop that way. We talked about how you can develop your papers. And today, week 3, we're talking about the art of war. So this is just an introduction, and I'll give the next slide soon. So the idea of the art of war, it's pretty important. There's certain 13 different principles on what you should be thinking about to manage wisely. It's an idea of war. It's 2,500 years old. It's a management book used by military generals and soldiers to manage soldiers in battle. But we've identified over 2,500 years that all of these rules are perfect for business management also. So we'll talk about that. I just also wanted to introduce the idea of, in our class with East Asian management, many people say that North America is where business basically is run, is ruled, is the first, it's the best. Christopher Columbus discovered it. Ever since then, it's been the best. But we should be aware that the Chinese boats, just like Christopher Columbus's boat, but more than 5 times bigger, had been sailing for more than 70 years throughout the world, including North America, before Christopher Columbus. Their culture is that they don't brag. That may be interesting to talk about. All of you need to understand this extra reading, which is talking about why social capital is important, why you should care about it. We'll talk about that later in week 4. And then know the culture of yourself. Please start talking about your MBTI, your human metrics, or your 16 personalities score. And then the technology, how you should be working with technology. And our groups are starting to talk about that. The last part, with technology, how you can learn anything, and how most people are using technology wrong. They're using Facebook just to share one photo and chat with somebody, but that is the improper way to actually use Facebook for business purposes. And it changes culture by culture, case by case, depending on where you are. So with the art of war, what do you guys know about the art of war so far? Mr. Go ahead.
No, because I just see Moon, so he just raised his hand.
Okay,
maybe
Mr. Moon.
he's gonna have something to share with us.
Great.
Well, it can be a personal question to you.
Okay.
I'm just curious, like, have you ever worked as a boss in the Asian company? And how did you manage working with the like lower workers in a different culture?
I have been an executive of Samsung. I've been an executive of Daewoo. I've been an executive of in the Korean government. I have worked for several, and I've been a chair department head of some universities in Korea. So yes, I have managed people. There initially have been many cultural problems. usually I started to solve them with the North American solutions. I would try to identify what our organization or company is trying to do, and I would get them to sit down and talk about what they understand about it. And initially, a lot of people lost respect for me. Number one, they lost respect for me because they thought I was too young, so I started to grow beards to make me look older. This beard is just a gimmick. I'm going to be shaving it soon with the other classes, but I realized that the beard doesn't help. You're treated as an outsider, as a non-Korean, non-Japanese, non-Korean. Many people are trying to go above you and take your job. So I realized the next problem was not just the age, it was the respect for knowing things. And we identified, again, in North America and in many Western countries, we have that whole idea that you were just talking about. Where is it here? This again, this idea of in my opinion, the Canadian opinion, everybody's equal. I'm just supposed to be guiding you. But the Asian people I was managing, they are expecting, and they only know a boss is supposed to be huge and a boss is supposed to have all answers ready. So if I start getting down side by side, friendly with them, asking them what they think, asking them if they understand the directions, immediately they think I'm not that big boss, so they don't respect me. So I had to kick people in the ass. I had to fire people. I had to replace people. I learned the hard way that you have to do research, find out about the organization, find out about the culture of the organization before you work with them and go in. And no matter what you think is best, what is most important is the people around that you're working with. Understand what they understand and manage that way. Otherwise, you may have to replace everybody. And if you do that, you'd probably only be hiring people from your culture, which would not work well in that culture. So does that answer your question? When I was I've worked with many companies and in many countries. So it's case by case. The real answer is start researching that organization inside, outside, and backwards. And regardless of what you like, you need to work for those people that are working there, for those locals first.
Thank you.
Anybody know about Nissan company? It's a Japanese company, obviously. It's similar to Toyota and Tesla. They're going around the world. About 10 years ago, 10 or 20 years ago, the world was going into crisis, and a lot of car companies, including Nissan, especially Nissan, was almost dissolved in bankruptcy. And Nissan is so big, they control so many workers in Japan, they tried many different people in Japan to run it, and they couldn't. They were going into bankruptcy. Anybody know about those details? Anything about Carlos Ghosn and Nissan? It was in Japan, and they hired an international person. One of the very first times a serious Japanese company hired a non-Japanese, and that person was, number one, from Brazil, which is many people think is poor, and then he's also from Lebanon. He's also, I think, got roots, family background from Portugal and Israel, and he's basically a mix of many different cultures altogether. Born in one area, from parents from different countries, raised in other areas, doing business in other areas. So he was not Japanese. He was not a regular international person. He came in and he started kicking ass. He started laying off people immediately, which was not the Western thing to do. He was not equal. He started replacing people that were wasting money, which you don't do in Japan. You almost never fire somebody in Japan. So he did that, and he made the company super successful. It became super famous again. But now that Japan is rich and stable, and the whole country is not going bankrupt, and that company is not going bankrupt, what has happened recently to Carlos Ghosn? Japan has basically taken back that role. That executive has been charged, in my opinion, with things that almost every international CEO does, but Japan identified this guy did it and that's bad, so let's kick him out or throw him in jail. And he actually had to escape illegally from the country by hiding in a box on a private jet to get to some other country that wouldn't deport him. So even if you're working with big multinational companies, maybe Google, maybe Amazon, maybe Samsung, what they do and how they do depends on where they are, for sure, and it depends on the environment. Like, as you identified, with coronavirus, everything is changing. All companies' practices are changing. So Nissan was almost dead, but at the same time, Japan was almost dead. They're in huge default for 10 years, nothing happened. So you need to be aware of that. So it's not just a simple thing of management. That relates to the art of war. These 13 principles. Let's identify these 13 different things. What they're saying is the art of war is divided into 13 principles or 13 rules, and it's referred to as being one chuan, one chronicle, and these are translations. It's so old and so famous, it's been translated by many people. So the first one I really like to refer to as detailed assessment and planning. When you're going to go to war, when you're going to manage yourself, when you're going to work for a company, the very first thing you must understand is you must research. Do detailed assessment of the organization and the environment and the people and the planning, how to work with the people around you. Let's say you come from a country from Mars, a different planet, and you are sure your country is superior to all lowly human beings. So you may start trying to make everybody follow the Martian way, but it will not work. Nobody will follow you unless you're killing a lot of people, unless you're replacing a lot of people. So it's better to research them, detailed assessment, plan how you're going to work first. And then you have to understand the challenge. What is the challenge? What is it that you need to do? And then you make your plan of attack. How are you going to do your business? How are you going to overcome these things or help these things given your research? What is your position? What's the next thing that you need to do? How you can direct, how you can manage other people. For example, in Korea, usually geniuses, although they may have great ideas, they develop faster and easier if they get this idea and give it to their boss. And the boss puts their name on it. And the boss becomes famous. And as the boss, even if the boss is like Donald Trump and maybe an idiot, the boss pulls you up as he becomes famous. The alternative is if you're a young genius and you join this company and you start promoting something to the president, your boss may probably get you fired and put you in some remote, like in Japan, they put you in some remote tropical island where you don't interact with anybody until you quit. So be aware of how to direct those different details. And all of it, there's a huge part of it. What is illusion? What is reality? Weaknesses and strengths. You know the SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. The weak points and the strong points. Be aware of those, not just your weaknesses and your threats, but the weaknesses and the strong points of the key people around you, how you can work with them. And then engage the force, variations and adaptability. No matter what's going on, you need to always be able to change, moving the forces, working with these people, situation, positioning, 9 different situations, the fiery attack, use of intelligence and spies. These overall are the 13 principles of the art of war. Obviously, they are simplified here, and there's a lot more details to them. And knowing that in China, just like Korea, one word, low context communication, has many different meanings. These instructions, if we look at them, if we look at the background of this, let me see if I can show you. What you see here on the screen, it looks like a whole bunch of pieces of wood, right? Pia, can you see this?
A few pieces put together.
Yeah, they look like pieces of wood all put together or chopsticks put together. That's a good comparison. They look like chopsticks all sewn together or laid side by side, and there's small little marks in them. This is the original art of war. They were pieces of wood. They didn't have paper invented back then, 2,500 years ago. They started writing on the wood, and this was the instructions. So, you know, there's not a lot of wood, and you understand the low context communication. One small word, one small character could be interpreted in many different ways. That's where we get back to this, and there's several different interpretations. Most of them are very similar now. And so just be aware of that, first of all. Overall, what is your position? How do you advance your position? And in my summary, the biggest answer to understand is research, 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 and try to be proactive. So listen, just like research. Most important skill you can learn. It's also the hardest thing to do. I, surprisingly, don't like to talk. I, surprisingly, am an introvert. However, for the last 20 years working with North Americans and working with Asians as a consultant, as a professor, I've been paid to give information. I've been paid to teach. So my habit, if somebody's going to pay me $100, I give them $150 or $1,000 worth of information so that they're happy. And that's made who I am. I talk too much. You should be talking more than me. The more you talk, what's going to happen? Mr. Moon, what will happen if you talk a lot more in class than just listening to me? What will happen to the relationship between you and I?
You might think he is very passionate about this lecture and topic of the classes. You might think I can provide some job options for him, maybe.
Okay, good. And again, remember, what is your position? Where are you? If you're with me, if I am the Canadian or international boss, I treat you as equal. So if you start talking, I can tailor our work to better help you. It's good for you to talk with this international boss. However, if I was a Korean boss or Chinese or the East Asian boss, where the bosses have that hierarchical structure, if you start giving suggestions to the boss, you may threaten the boss because he usually doesn't see that, except for other people that are at the same level trying to take his job. So he may hate you. Hopefully not. It is 2021. Things are changing. People are changing very quickly. But be aware of what historically has been the case. Your position with international people is different than how you manage with the Korean or the East Asian people. So go ahead, Pia.
With that being said, I just wanted to say that in the West, I also made many experiences with bosses who think kind of like the Asian way, who get offended if you say something. So I think that should be considered, even though it's probably best if it was different.
Absolutely. We say in Korea, information is centralized. It's just controlled usually by one person. And then it's shared a little bit more with the top vice presidents. And then it's shared a little bit more so that there's a very small amount with the top directors, and almost no information giving to the managers, and basically zero information giving to the staff working. That's one thing. And you're not supposed to go around your managers. That is the typical thing in Korea. Right. And in North America, they say that it's supposed to be a decentralized, so everybody has access to it. And it's mostly shown in Scandinavian countries where everything's absolutely equal. That you're not trying to hide information. However, I have worked with the world's highest tech companies, Samsung or Applied Materials, which I think trains Samsung how to develop technology. So Applied Materials is even more sort of important in many ways, but that's a Silicon Valley company. And that Silicon Valley company, they paid people for results, and they paid you a hell of a lot to join the company. And then after you got high salaries, they gave you $1 million stock option to perform the best because everybody was supposed to be the best. And it sounds good in theory. But as Pio was just saying, some companies, they don't like sharing. So why? What is your position? How do you advance? If you understand your boss controls you, if you are sharing better ideas than the boss has, maybe the CEO will see you and replace your boss with you. So your boss may be threatened thinking you're going to take his job. That's number one. Number two, in your company, maybe your boss has 10 different staff he's managing. You have 9 different other people you work with. Don't forget, each one of you is in competition to get the boss's favor or to get the bonuses. Only one person can usually get the top marks, for example. And so other people, many, many times, I'm not going to list company names, but in high-tech companies and companies that are global, they usually will have people competing to show the best results. How could you do that? When you have 9 other competitors, some people stay late at night, and after your colleague goes home, they will come over, they will look at your notes, see what you're developing, then take your notes and give it to the boss so that the boss thinks they developed it, not you. If you've watched Sex and the City, that thing kind of happens quite a bit, North American kind of television. Unfortunately, it happens quite a lot with high-tech companies. Google, for example, Tesla, for example, they only hire people that have the ability to best manage a project. And if some other, even if he's a loser and doesn't understand the details, but if he can steal your idea or take your idea and give it to the boss is going to think he's better and he's going to replace you. So people may not share as much. It depends on what is your position, who's around you, and what type of environment is that. So how do you advance your position? It's not simply working hard. Working hard many times could be dangerous. You need to work wisely. Thank you. Does that support what you were talking about, Pia? I mean, yeah, Pia?
Yes, definitely.
Listen. Find out what is good. As soon as you join a company, you should try to already know before you walk into the building what you need to do. Most Western companies, they'll have a training manual where you can get that before you walk to your company desk. And so your very first day you're walking to your desk, you already know how to work. You already know where the information is. You already know what you're supposed to do. Versus in Asia and Korea, the very first day on your job, you know nothing. You use those first 6 months of work life to get your basic training, and then you start adding value. Very, very, very different. So be aware, what is the normal thing to do? What would happen if you become a high-level person, like you're hired as a pretty serious manager or director of operations, but you listen for the first, in Korea, usually you have 3 months training program or at least a month training program. What would happen if you join a company in North America or even in China, Vietnam, or any country in the world, and you take a month just listening to the staff around you? Well, what would happen is your bosses, the CEOs, would think they've hired you, they're paying a lot of money, and for 1 month they've got nothing from you. They would think that you're terrible, and you may have a reputation of being terrible. So again, you must understand what is your position and how do you need to advance it. Can you go in and if you're just a university graduate with a low-level job, yes, you can listen and take 3 months to learn how to do things and then slowly start giving results to your boss. That is normal, that is good. If you start doing it too fast, your boss may be threatened. If you take too long to listen, your boss may think you're not good at all. It's not a simple answer. So research these details. Listen, understand the situation, then move to pursue opportunity always. Attack where they are unprepared and least expected. This is the view negatively, it's viewed negatively by a few people, but respected by disruptive technology. You may want to check into disruptive technology now with 2021 and the coronavirus the world is changing super fast, moving online, moving with artificial intelligence, moving to work and hire anybody from anywhere in the world. Things are changing very fast. So combine your passion, your talents, your skills, and the market needs. Think honestly and practice, continue practicing the 10,000 hours to improve. Show you're improving and show results. But if you are in Korea, if you are in Asia, show your details maybe secretly to your boss, so your boss can put his name on it or her name on it and submit it to her boss. If people think it's too much coming from you, the only person that really notices is your boss. And as long as your boss is happy, if you're giving him results, he's going to keep you and protect you. Discern the cost and benefit of all things. Develop your perception. Pay attention even to the smallest things. Fun challenges. How can you learn about this stuff? You can learn anything online nowadays. Did you know that I think there's 113 middle schools and high schools and colleges closing their doors in Korea each month since 2020 started? And I think over 3,000 classes are almost finished. So I'm going to wrap this up soon. But you can learn anything online. You should learn about companies. You should learn about your job. You should learn how to do things before you start doing them. You can go through them. Even Harvard has classes that are online and teaching these things like Chinese management. For week 4, I'm talking about this. Please be aware of what is social capital. And if I ask you one question for week 4, I'll try to remember and remind you in next class, what is the one most important thing you need to be successful? Do you need natural talent? Do you need intelligence? Do you need a good education, effort, luck, money? What do you need to be successful? That's what for today. I think we've finished beyond the class.